Hi, I'm Roanna Carleton-Taylor, the founder of Witchcraft Forward, and I've been asked to speak to you today about the subject of witchcraft on a budget. Okay. You may have to turn your volume up, by the way. I tend to have a really quiet voice, I'm told, when I go on video. So witchcraft is about using the art of improvisation and what comes to hand to manipulate the world and work magic. As witchcraft has become widely practiced in modern times, a lot of misconceptions have started to spring up around the subject. And this includes the tools which have been given, in my opinion, a lot more emphasis than they actually need when practicing witchcraft. I think the focus needs to be on who actually does the magic, the witch or the tool. So any witch who feels that she can't practice witchcraft without maxing her credit card out at the local occult shop is possibly on the wrong path. There's no single item that any witch needs to own before she can practice her craft, and some of the best witches I know actually practice their magic using pretty much nothing but their own hands. And they do achieve really good results from this as well. So we need to move away from this prescriptive idea that we need to buy and own certain items before we can actually actualise our craft and start practicing. Try to see your witch cupboard as something that will grow in time. It will expand alongside your personal knowledge and your experience. Buying everything in one go can be a bit tempting, but it's also very overwhelming, and you will end up with lots of things that chances are you'll never find a use for. So my advice is to buy what you need as you grow to need it. And don't put off starting your path until you've got everything, because again, I think what some people do is they say I'll start my practice when I've got everything I may possibly ever need to be able to practice as a witch. It's just not needed. There's so many improvisations we can make with things we've already got, things that you can acquire without spending money on them. And the key element of what it is to be a witch is somebody who's starting to practice with what's around them, improvising, rather than buying a load of things that maybe might even be necessary. Also, if you wait until you have ingredients for every possible contingency, then you deny yourself the opportunity to grow and to think about what you actually could use in your magic, rather than just reading off the internet a list of things that some spell tells you need. The essence of magic is learning how to use the things you do have to achieve the results that you want. And it's putting the thought into spells you can perform now, rather than spells you can do in 3 weeks when the eBay order has arrived. This gives you greater flexibility in your magic, and it allows you to react quickly to the circumstances around you. And don't forget that the creativity of the thinking and designing the spell will add to the impact of the overall effort. So in order to demystify the craft and to make the practice of magic more accessible to the man or woman in the street who may be on a budget, I've put together a few ideas of things that can easily be acquired which will be of use to you in your spell work. These items broadly fall into 4 categories. Items you can find in nature, items that you already own or very likely already own, items you can buy cheaply, and items you can make yourself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these 4 areas and give you some examples. So it is going to feel a little bit like me reading a list, but I hope that you'll be able to take from this some ideas as a basis for your own improvisation, for your own workings. Okay, so if we start with items you can find in nature, so I'm going to run you through some of these ideas of things that you could use. So the first is feathers. Feathers can be used to represent air on an altar, and they can be used for spells involving travel or flight, or to invoke the spirit of a bird. And they're also very easy to acquire, particularly if you go around your local farm and look at the birds that have dropped their feathers there. Crystals. Different crystals have different properties which can be useful in either casting or healing. Crystals can be used to represent the earth, to aid in meditation, or even to create a crystal tarot for divinatory purposes. Rocks. You can use rocks as representations of the earth or to bring strength to a working. Fossils. Fossils you can find or you can buy. Fossils can be used in workings to add age, experience, and the ability to be unscathed by changes in the world to a working. At least As with most of these things, that's how I would personally use them. If you do find another use for them that will work for you, that's fantastic. Plants. Different plants and herbs have differing properties, both magical and medicinal. Many herbs marketed on websites as specialists actually grow wild quite locally, so it is actually worth buying a book and seeing what you've got growing locally to you before you start buying expensive dried herbs. Berries. You can use berries for workings involving nutrition, and good as a seasonal offering to those who honour deity. Tree bark. I would use tree bark to symbolise change and growth from within. The woods of different trees have properties that can be brought to a working through the bark of the tree. Tree bark and fallen twigs are also handy for makeshift wands for impromptu outdoor magic. Snail shells. These are very symbolic of the home, and they're great for casting spells that involve protection of the home and the safety of the occupants inside. I also, just thinking now outside the box, great for travel as well, the idea of taking your home with you, taking the safety of your home with you, taking snail shells as a representation of the safety of your home. Acorns, an association with wealth. You can collect these as an offering for deity, or you can keep them on the person as a talisman for luck and prosperity. Conkers, these are very resonant of the autumn, a harvest festival offering. You can use these to invoke the properties of toughness and strength. And the conker shells, the green prickly casing, can be used to store items for magical protection, or filled with a spell and left in the earth to rot for slow yielding spell work. If you're lucky enough to find a caterpillar chrysalis, these can be used for the metamorphosis of the idea of change from one thing to another. That's a really powerful idea in magic, the idea of changing the state of something. And I think, as I say, anybody lucky enough to get their hands on a caterpillar chrysalis could find they could put that to some really good use. Roadkill and dead animals and dead birds. These can be great for invoking the spirits aligned with them to assist in your work. Dead bees. These are fantastic for people who hex. Great for adding to spell bottles and shaking up with poppets of people you don't like. Fantastic. Rose thorns. These can also be employed for hexing, most commonly pressing into wax poppets to cause pain and distress. If you're lucky enough to have cats, or unlucky enough to have cats, cat claws. Cats are associated with independence, so adding cat claws to a working may give you an idea again of dissociation and bringing independence and individuality into a spell. As some of you may have seen in a previous video, I keep spiders, and spider parts are fantastic to use in magic work. They're great for spells to engineer fear or to enhance stealth. And spiders are also the creators of their own homes, so spider parts can be a useful ingredient for spells involving the home. Spider webbing can be used to wrap items in for magical protection or for secrecy. I also keep a snake, and I suspect I'll end up doing a video on that at some point for Debbie as well. Thanks, Debbie. Snake skins. The obviously snake sheds. It sheds its skin on a regular basis, so you do have an access to a supply of this if you do keep snakes. And you can use this for spells involving change and leaving the old behind. It can also be used as a binding agent for binding spells, and it plays a particularly large part in hoodoo for anybody who's interested in the hoodoo traditions. Hagstones. These can be great fun to find if you've got a family. Encourage your children to go out and find stones with holes in them. You can tie string or leather cording through a hagstone and use as a pendulum for divinatory purposes. So again, the expensive pendulums you see in the shops aren't necessary, and some might argue that you'd actually get a better result from a stone you've gone to the effort of finding and bonding with yourself anyway. Dandelion roots. I'm an avid gardener, but not a great one, and I can't grow mandrake. I don't think many people, particularly in the UK climate, can grow mandrake. But it is a root that's often used for poppets, customisable living poppets. You can actually substitute dandelion roots, which have quite a similar root structure to the mandrake plant, and I think most of us can probably manage to grow a dandelion. Then there's elements of the weather. So you can keep rain, hailstones, snow, sun-scorched earth, And these can be used to bring different kind of elements of passion to a working. So I might use snow to slow something down, to stop somebody. I might use sun-scorched earth to bring, I suppose, a sense of desolation to a working. Or you might use rain to wash something away, to rid yourself of something. Loads of different options there, but again, having elements of the weather in your freezer, your fridge, your cupboard can be really useful to a witch. Mould, always handy having a bit of mould on hand. Great for spells needing decay or where you want to spoil something. Quite a traditional one here, graveyard dirt. This can be used to invoke protection from ancestors or used as a foundation in opening dialogue with the dead. And again, this has its roots in hoodoo. So the next section is items that chances are you already own. So we've gone through what you'd find in nature, what you can go and gather. This is now items that you probably have around the house anyway at the moment. Now most of the items we already own can be found in the kitchen. The kitchen's actually a pretty witchy place anyway. So the things you're almost bound to have in your house: vinegar, used for cleansing; table salt, you can use that for purifying; honey for sweetening; and things like Tabasco and chili sauce for invoking anger and rage and passion into a spell. I'd use milk for calming and soothing, and you can actually use milk to douse fire in spells, and that's a great way of calming anger spells. Eggshells, these have a multitude of purposes. They're really good for using as biodegradable offering bowls for leaving offerings in the natural world. I know a lot of witches who practice with the fairies and have an association with the fae will use these to put tiny amounts of milk and honey out, because again they do biodegradable, as offerings for the fairy world. And powdered eggshell is often employed for purification and protection. Vegetable peelings, again, most homes, no short supply of these. These can be used for workings involving discarding the old and embracing what's within. Again, that idea of change and metamorphosis. Bones. This could just be your Sunday roast carcass. Bones can be ground down and used as a representative of the animal that's died, or as a symbol of the life force in general. Very useful thing to have is bones. Olive oil. This can be very handy to dilute essential oils that will make them go further. So again, if you are on a budget, you can make those oils go further. Spices and herbs from the cooking spice rack. So a lot of the herbs that you may want to employ for magical purposes can be bought far more cheaply in the local supermarket than they can in the local occult store. So check first before you put a massive order in. Certainly the basic cooking spices, your sage, your thyme, you will get a lot cheaper in Sainsbury's. Sage itself. Sage is commonly used for cleansing. You can sprinkle a little sage in the bottom of a small ceramic pot and light with newspaper. This is much cheaper than buying a smudge stick, and it's ideal for cleansing individual items by moving them through the flames or using as a censer around the room. Burned wood, charcoal or chimney soot from fires. This can be used as a basis for making your own homemade black salt. If you just take your normal salt in a container and add the dust or the ash and shake it up, you're effectively making your own black salt, which again is sold at quite a premium if you look at it online, what people will actually charge for black salt. Chances are you'll have tin cans and glass bottles lying around the house. And tin foil. This is really good stuff. We use tin foil for reflective and mirror spells. This is quite a common item in a lot of spell work that I do. Also, tin foiling a flat surface can be used in much the same way as a bowl of water for scrying purposes. So again, you don't have to go out and buy an expensive scrying tool like a fancy pot or a black mirror. Tin foiling a flat surface will actually work to much the same effect. Fridge magnets. These are very useful for attraction spells. We've done this quite a bit in love magic. You can name each magic and draw them together for two people to be attracted to each other. We've also done this to attract something toward an individual. So for example, a job they want or a house they want. That can quite effectively be done with the use of magic, with the use of magnets. Letter openers. Chances are you might have a fancy letter opener that's been in the family for a while, and this can double up as the ceremonial knife. It can be quite beautiful in some cases, these elaborate letter openers. Blood. Depending on how squicky you are on this one, menstrual blood is ideal for fertilising plants, and it does make sense to have some of your own blood safely stored, as if it's an ingredient that you want to use in spell work, you'd probably rather not go to the trouble of bleeding when you actually want to cast a spell. I tend to find is that if you do cut yourself accidentally and something happens, just keeping the tissues that you've used to dab up the blood can stand you in good stead later. And much the same with hair, keep some when you get it cut, and plan ahead. This is really important. I always think it's really important that when you have children or pets and they have the hair cut, keep some of the hair, and that way if you do have a horrible instance where you have to try and locate a missing child or a missing pet, you've got that tag lock as a starting point for the spell, safely at home. And hair ties and shoelaces. These work in not magic, and again you can add the personal energies of the owner who actually owns a shoelace into the spell. So that's items that chances are you've already got at the home. So the next one is items that you can buy cheaply. Okay. So probably the best place to start here is charity shops. You can buy so many things in charity shops cheap. And again, sometimes they're quite unique because you can buy quite old items. It's very different to the idea of just putting a bumper order on the internet for Nemesis Now and that kind of thing. And when you find a chalice in a charity shop that may have a history to it, it's maybe passed down through the generations, you can find some really lovely things, and they probably feel a bit more personal than they would if you had just ordered them piecemeal off the internet. So some examples of things you can buy in charity shops. You can get jars, offering bowls, tins, crystals. You can get altar cloths. I find scarves or pieces of fabric will work just as well as a purpose-made altar cloth. Statues, and some really good second-hand books on witchcraft as well if you look in the bookshelves. There's other places you can look to get things cheaply as well. I like Poundland. I've had some real bargains from Poundland. One of the things I go to Poundland for is dolls. You can buy really cheap dolls, and these make great puppets. So what you can do is take the basic structure of the doll and customise it to be the person that you're casting your working for or against, and you've got the basic shape already, so it's all kind of made for you. All you have to do is the personalisation aspect. So I suppose the same with charity shops. You could pick up a few Barbies and do much the same thing there. Plasticine as well. Now I probably make most of my puppets from plasticine. It's a really great way to make puppets with very little cost. It's also quite nice when you are using plasticine and you're moulding that person. You're visualising them as you do it. You're putting their energies and their essence into it. If you are performing hex work, sometimes that extra little squeeze can be quite enjoyable when you're making a puppet for that purpose. Another thing I use Poundland for is sewing kits as well. It's always handy to have a sewing kit on your person when you're a witch, because you may want to perform a binding spell on the move, and it's really useful to have something like a sewing kit for that purpose. The other place that I tend to say buy, but more steal, is restaurants. You can find little salt packages from fast food restaurants, and again you probably find most witches would keep some salt on their person for purifying if this is needed on the move. You can also find some nice bits at your local butcher as well, because there's lots of parts of the animal that the butcher probably won't sell. So you can ask him for the non-edible bits, so eyes, brains, bones, offal, that kind of thing. I'm about to perform a spell that we've designed recently involving a heart and doing some work for a healing spell for a person who's just been diagnosed with angina, and one of those things is going to be taking an actual heart and using the heart as a representative of that person's heart and rubbing our healing health into it, so rubbing our relevant oils that we've done the blessings on into the actual heart and using it as a representation. So it's things like that that can potentially again be almost free, because the butcher will give them away for virtually nothing, but it's a nice idea if you can get it. You also have to consider when shops will have their clearance sales, so it's important to know not just where to buy but when to buy it. And sometimes our Christian friends can help us out here with Christmas. So just after Christmas you can stock up for the year. You'll get all your red, green and gold candles. So you've got pretty much every one of those candles you'll need. You can buy in bulk at Christmas. You can also get, in particularly in the craft stores, you can get great big clear Christmas tree balls. And these are really useful to make witch balls out of. So what you can do is you can buy them quite cheaply in the Christmas sales and put your own herbs, your own tag-lock thing, whatever you want to do to personalise them, and use them as either decoration or as protection in the home. Halloween obviously is the big one. Great time to stock up on your black and your orange candles. The other thing you can buy in the Halloween sales is your witches' hats. Now I think most of them do look a little bit tacky, a little bit cheap, but what you can do once you've got the basic structure, particularly with the basic fabric structure, is you can customise it and make your hat for ceremony. So you can decorate for the seasons and the Sabbats. You can put flowers on, elements of nature, fabric. You can make it a very attractive design, something you'd want to wear during ceremony, but rather than having to go to the trouble of making that basic witch hat structure yourself, which I know from experience isn't easy if you're not keen on sewing. Bonfire night is the other one. Now bonfire night, the best thing I think about bonfire night for a witch is sparklers. These are fantastic. These are great for directing energy, and they're actually a perfect substitute for a wand or for a circle opener. I like sparklers because one of the things you can do is you can write the spell words in the air. You can almost kind of write your intention into the elements, and I think that's fantastic. I would use sparklers all year round if I could find them. Now we're lucky enough to live in a modern world, and I think that's very handy at times. Some of my contemporaries in the world of witches do insist on doing things by hand, and we respect that. That's fine. People have their own preferences, but I'm a big believer in the fact that as we've got this technology, we may as well use it. So you've got your computer. So instead of having to buy an expensive hand-bound leather, whatever, then you may as well keep your grimoire on your computer. I upload mine to the cloud, so it's accessible from any device I want to use, and it means I won't lose it if my computer does obviously blow up. It means all your spell work's kept safely, it's kept securely, so obviously you can password it, and it means it's not all in one place the way it is with the handwritten grimoire. You've got your mobile phone. I keep a list of the ingredients I've got in stock on my mobile phone, and that's so I don't make duplicate purchases. So I know I might need pink candles, but I've got 20 years worth of green candles in stock, that kind of thing. And from an economic point of view, that makes sense because you're not buying things you've already got, which I think when you do have quite an extensive craft cupboard built up is a real danger. And you've got Google. One of the things I've seen in quite a few witches' houses is these really elaborate egg timers. I've got one myself. Pointless really. I mean, if you want to time something for magical purposes, just type set timer in Google, it'll do it for you. You've also got lots of online tools that you can use. You've got your correspondence charts. My website and other websites will provide correspondence charts. You've got moon calendars, though it could be argued that even cheaper than that is going outside and having a look at the moon. But these are all tools that you can make use of without having to buy, like I say, expensive printed copies. So that's the section of things that you've already got. And we're moving to the last section now, which is items that you can make yourself. So it makes sense as a principle to buy ingredients in bulk and to make larger quantities. And look for things that happen to come your way. Sometimes things actually come into your life for a purpose. I know I bought a while ago some electronic thing that came in a box with all those little plasticine, foamy things. And I thought, I don't know why I need these, but I thought, do you know what, I'll keep them. And I did keep them. And it was only a few weeks later that I actually wanted to do a protection spell, and it involved taking my representation of the person and putting it inside a box with these little, like I say, foamy things as a protective cushioning. So again, not something I bought, but something that I saw that came my way and I kept until I had a use for it. And I think it's important at this point to mention that we need to change, as witches, we need to change our mindset. So rather than thinking, what do I need to have? to change that mindset to what have I got and what could I use it for. Unfortunately, the downside of that is you do end up being a bit of a hoarder, so I'll warn you about that now. So items you can make yourself, so incense, a few drops of essential oils and a handful of aspen or wood shavings. You can cover this on a charcoal dish the same way you would shop-bought incense. It may not be quite as long-lasting, but it will certainly serve your purpose if you're wanting incense for ritual. You can make your own flying ointments. You can use Vaseline as a base. My preference, might be quite a personal preference here, is to use Vicks. I love the smell of Vicks. And it's very, very easily absorbed into the skin. Flying ointments are traditionally used in crossing the hedge or as an aid to meditation. Some of the more traditional hallucinogenic preparations are made from baneful herbs, which we won't be going into here. But quite a lot of others can be made of plants that are much more easily accessible and non-toxic, and these a lot of witches do swear by. Candles. Now candles, one of the great substitutes for candles is wax crayons. So if you can't afford to buy expensive spell candles, which are totally unnecessary anyway, you might as well just use tea lights. You can use crayons as wax candles in themselves. Just add a wick and the candle can be shaved. So you have two options there. You can either add a wick or you can shave the candle and add the coloured wax to a tea light if you particularly want to use a special designated colour in your working. You can also collect the remnants of candles to make single candles, and even doing this you can actually combine spell intents in this way. I know one witch in particular who doesn't burn her spell candles down all the way when she's done her working. She'll keep the small amount at the bottom, and then what she'll do is she'll blend them together to bring together different intents for different purposes. Melted wax. You can purchase a cheap slow cooker for a wax pot and melt down old or partially burned candles that can be reformed into moulds. This is another great way of making poppets. You can cool the wax down and use it to form poppets. You can also use the heated wax for binding spells or for sending spells via the mail and using the wax to seal the intention into the letter. You can also create your own ways of performing divination. One of the probably the most expensive things out there for a witch who's just starting up is it's a temptation to buy a lot of sets of rune stones, a lot of sets of tarot cards. This could really set you back a bit. There are a few ways that I do this that are completely free. Cloud divination. So just lying on your back on a summer lawn, looking at the clouds, looking for the patterns, looking for the recurrences, interpreting the clouds in different ways. That's a traditional and very powerful form of divination. My personal way of doing it actually is to use my tarantulas. I tend to have either I would use my Ouija board, or I would just use a simple piece of paper with yes or no on it, pop the tarantula on it, give her a prod, and again use that as a form of divination. That's like I say, a highly personal one. There's so many different ways you can do that, and I think a lot of this is how the intuition speaks to the witch, what will work for you. If you do want to use more traditional methods, playing cards can be substituted for tarot cards, and you can easily make your own runes by sawing a piece of wood into slices and painting runes on them. You can grow your own herbs. Yoghurt pots on your kitchen windowsill, obviously a tried and tested method, and you can set up your own herb drying line as well. Just string up a bit of twine on over the door, or use one of those over the door cotton organisers. A cheap coffee grinder makes an excellent herb grinder, and that again saves you having to buy expensive dried herbs. In terms of home decorations, you can soak and bend willow twigs to make circles that you can use as a base for homemade dream catchers or pentacles. And you can customise your willow circles for the season with berries, leaves and flowers from nature. It's all about bringing the outdoors indoors. Again, trees are not just for Yule. You can find small dead trees that have blown over, and these can be decorated with ribbons at Beltane, webs at Samhain and lights at Yule. And if you're feeling a little bit tacky, you can pop a bit of fake snow on it at Imbolc. Indoor trees are also an excellent place to hang your spells in progress. I have a branch in my room over the ceiling, and I tend to hang all my spells that are in the progress stage on there. Keep an eye on them. And if you do that, put a post-it note on them, because you're constantly finding you're looking at poppets and thinking, "Who the bloody hell's this?" So put a post-it note on the safe side. Wands as well. Wands are really expensive. I'm really amazed when I look at some of the wands that people are trying to sell me, and I'm thinking, well, do you know what? That's a twig. Which, to be fair, would have exactly the same effect as a wand you spent 50 quid on. Now, a wand made from dried fallen wood can be customised to be exactly what you want, with things like the crystals and the feathers of your choice. A lot of times shops are unaware of the woods that go into making the shop-bought wands, and one of the things that I think, if you are going to use a wand to direct your energies, I think it's really important you know what tree that wand's come from. You want to have an understanding of that, as opposed to just being a wand or a stick. So buy your wand with an eye to understanding the material it's made from and how the properties of that wood can be worked in just spellwork. Okay, so we've gone through rather a lot there, so I'm just going to summarise. I think it's really important to remember that witches all practice differently, and there is no one right way to practice witchcraft. The practice of using tools will vary between individuals, and there are many ways to substitute cheaper and just as effective items for the tools and the ingredients commonly associated with witchcraft. The power of the craft lies ultimately in the witch, and not in the tools or the ingredients she uses. And in final summary, in witchcraft it isn't what you've got, it's what you do with it that counts. Thank you very much.